The rhythmic hum of the great American industrial machine began not with a roar, but with a steady, hypnotic pulse that echoed through the misty valleys of Pennsylvania and the iron-rich hills of the north. It was a sound that settled deep into the bones of the earth as the sun dipped below the horizon, and a soft charcoal haze draped itself over the burgeoning cities of the East Coast. Imagine the slow and deliberate movement of heavy iron gears turning in a silent sequence of precision as they grind against one another with a dull and comforting thud that vibrates through the wooden floorboards of a quiet mill. The air is thick with the scent of aged cedar and the faint metallic tang of cooling steel, which hangs motionless in the still night air. As you walk through the corridors of history, the light is dim and amber, filtered through thick glass panes that are coated in a fine layer of soot from a century of progress. Every footstep on the cobblestone streets of old Pittsburgh is muffled by a light dusting of snow that falls in large, heavy flakes and settles silently on the cold black rails of the locomotive tracks. These tracks stretch out like endless silver ribbons into the darkness, vanishing into the vast expanse of the American wilderness where the only sound is the wind whispering through the tall pines. The steam engines sit idle in the roundhouse, their massive boilers letting out a long, slow hiss of expiring heat that sounds like a giant drawing a deep breath before a long winter sleep. The water in the nearby river flows with a dark and glassy stillness, carrying the reflections of 1,000 flickering gas lamps that line the wharf where the wooden crates are stacked in perfect silent rows. Inside the great library of a forgotten industrialist, the walls are lined with leather-bound ledgers filled with neat rows of ink-stained numbers that tell the story of a nation built bolt by bolt and rivet by rivet. The scratching of a quill pen across the parchment is the only sound in the room, a rhythmic and tiny noise that lulls the mind into a state of total calm. You can see the orange glow of a distant furnace through the window, but it is far away and silent, its heat only a memory as the cool night breeze brushes against the glass. The great flywheels of the textile mills in Lowell have slowed to a crawl, their heavy leather belts creaking softly as they settle into their evening rest. The rhythmic clacking of the looms has faded into a gentle echo that sounds like the distant clicking of a clock on a mantel in a room where the fire has burned down to glowing embers. There is a sense of immense weight and stability in this world of iron and stone, a feeling that everything is exactly where it belongs, and that the march of time is slow and purposeful. The heavy iron gates of a shipyard swing shut with a deep metallic groan that signals the end of the day and the beginning of a long, peaceful watch out on the Great Lakes. The massive or freighters glide through the water with barely a ripple, their engines vibrating at a frequency so low it is felt rather than heard, a deep internal hum that resonates with the very core of the planet. The stars above the Midwestern plains are bright and cold, watching over the silent fields of grain that sway in a slow, synchronized dance with the midnight wind. As you drift further into the history of the machine, you feel the coolness of the marble floors in the great banking halls of New York, where the shadows are long and the silence is absolute. The heavy brass clocks on the walls tick with a deliberate and heavy cadence, marking the passage of minutes that feel like hours in the stillness. The soot-stained bricks of the old warehouses hold the warmth of the day, letting it go slowly into the night air as the fog rolls in from the Atlantic, shrouding the Statue of Liberty in a soft gray blanket of quietude. The iron bridges that span the wide rivers are silent sentinels, their massive cables humming a low tune in the wind, a song of strength and endurance that has no end. Every nut and every bolt in the great structure of the Republic is tightened to perfection, creating a sense of total security and unchanging order. You are walking now through a forest of tall smokestacks that reach toward the moon, but they are empty and cold now, their work done for the season, as the owls perch on their rims and look out over the sleeping valleys. The sound of a distant foghorn echoes across the bay, a long and low note that stays in the air for a long time before dissolving into the silence of the sea. The heavy curtains in the parlor are drawn tight, shutting out the world and leaving only the soft glow of the lamp and the steady rhythm of your own breathing. The Iron Age was a time of heavy things and slow things of things built to last for 1,000 years. And as you contemplate the massive scale of the steam hammers and the silent power of the hydroelectric dams, you feel your thoughts becoming heavy and slow like the oil that lubricates the great shafts of the turbines. It is a thick and golden oil that flows with a languid grace, coating every moving part in a layer of protection and silence. The world is wrapped in the velvet darkness of a 19th century night, and the only light is the faint shimmer of the Milky Way reflected in the polished brass of a telescope in an observatory on a lonely hill. The astronomer has long since gone to bed, leaving the gears of the telescope to track the stars with a tiny and imperceptible ticking sound. You are drifting now on a raft of cedar with down the Mississippi River, the water lapping gently against the logs with a sound like a soft heartbeat. The river is wide and ancient, and it carries you through the heart of the continent past the dark bluffs and the silent levees where the willow trees dip their branches into the stream. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and river moss, and as you close your eyes, you can feel the immense power of the American landscape supporting you and holding you in a state of perfect equilibrium. The iron and the blood have settled into the soil, and the machine has found its resting pulse, and as the last embers of the industrial fire go dark, you are left in a world of profound peace and silent strength, where the only task is to listen to the slow and steady turning of the world. The golden haze of a late summer afternoon settles over the rolling plains of the American West as the tall prairie grass sways in a rhythmic and hypnotic motion like the waves of a vast and endless ocean of amber. The air is warm and carries the faint scent of sun-baked earth and wild sage, which lingers in the stillness of the wide, open sky, where the clouds move with a glacial slowness that calms the mind and settles the spirit. Imagine a lone wooden wagon moving across the horizon, its wheels turning with a steady and repetitive creak that blends into the sound of the wind whispering through the distant canyon walls. There is no rush in this journey, as the path forward is marked only by the gentle curve of the land and the fading light of a sun that takes hours to dip below the purple mountains. As you watch the shadow of the wagon lengthen across the dust, you feel a sense of profound quietude descending upon the landscape, where the history of a nation was written in the slow footsteps of those who walked toward the setting sun. The dust kicked up by the oxen hangs in, the air like a fine golden mist before settling back onto the earth in a silent and eternal embrace. In the high plateaus, the air grows cooler, and the scent of pine needles becomes more pronounced as the shadows of the ancient trees stretch out to touch the cooling stones of the mountain passes. Every rock and every pebble has a place in this vast topography, and they remain unmoved by the passage of time, holding the secrets of the empire within their cold and silent cores. The expansion of the frontier was a slow and deliberate unfolding of map and spirit, where the ink of the cartographer met the reality of the rugged terrain in a dance of patience and endurance. The rivers flow with a deep and steady hum as they carve their way through the limestone and granite, creating a low-frequency vibration that resonates with the very heartbeat of the continent. You can hear the distant and muffled sound of a waterfall cascading into a deep pool where the water remains dark and glassy, reflecting the first faint stars of the evening. The price of empire is a weight that rests heavily, but peacefully on the shoulders of the land, a memory of movement and change that has now found its final resting place in the quiet valleys. The campfires of 1,000 pioneers have flickered out, leaving only the soft glow of the moon to illuminate the empty trails that lead toward the Pacific. The heavy canvas of the tents flutters in the night breeze with a soft and comforting thud like the beating of a distant drum that is slowly fading into silence. The history of Manifest Destiny is a story of long days and longer nights of staring into the vastness of the Great Basin and finding a sense of belonging in the emptiness. The stars are so bright and so numerous that they form a thick blanket of light over the sleeping earth, and as you look up at them, your thoughts become as light and as airy as the atmosphere itself. There is a deep sense of security in the permanence of the Mountains and the reliability of the tides along the rugged coast of Oregon, where the waves hit the shore with a slow and rhythmic pulse that sounds like the breath of the world. The salt spray hangs in the air, cooling the skin and bringing a sense of total refreshment and calm. The iron rails that would eventually bridge the gap between the two oceans are still and cold tonight, humming a low and vibrating note as the temperature drops and the metal settles into the ballast. The work of the day is long forgotten, and the tools of the trade are laid out in neat and orderly rows in the silent workshops of the prairie towns. The wooden porches of the general stores are empty, and the rocking chairs sway slightly in the wind with a gentle and repetitive motion that lulls the senses into a state of blissful boredom. The horses in the corral are standing still, their heads bowed, as they drift into a light sleep, their breath forming small clouds of steam in the crisp night air. Everything is at a standstill as the great narrative of expansion reaches its quiet conclusion in the dark of the night, where the shadows are kind and the silence is a gift. You are floating now on the current of a slow-moving river that winds its way through the heart of the territory, past the silent bluffs and the dark stands of timber that line the banks. The water is cool against the wood of the boat, and the sound of the ripples is like a soft lullaby that has no beginning and no end. The weight of the crown and the cost of the colony are but distant echoes in this peaceful wilderness, where the only reality is the coolness of the air and the steadiness of the earth beneath you. The prairie dogs have retreated to their burrows, and the hawks have found their nests in the high crags, leaving the sky to the moon and the drifting clouds. The golden era of the frontier is a memory wrapped in the softest wool and the quietest dreams, where the struggle and the strife have been smoothed over by the passage of decades. The grand architecture of the empire stands silent and dignified in the moonlight, its stone pillars and marble halls reflecting the pale light with a soft and ethereal glow. The maps are folded and the ledgers are closed, and the ink is dry on the treaties of the past, leaving only the quiet pulse of the living land to tell the story. As you sink deeper into the cushions of the night, you feel the immense scale of the American landscape embracing you and protecting you with its vastness and its silence. The mountains are your sentinels, and the rivers are your guides as you drift further and further into a state of total and absolute relaxation. The shadows of manifest destiny have become the softest shades of blue and gray, blending into the darkness of a perfect sleep, where the only sound is the rhythmic and steady breathing of a nation at rest. The price of empire has been paid in the currency of time and patience, and now there is only the quiet and the peace that follows a long and arduous journey. The spirit of the West is a gentle wind